What would be the biggest successes for the Utah Jazz in a year that figures to be a down year? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. Excited as always to be filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. You guys know me by now, but if you don't, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who is a credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Draft Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant and statistician the past 3 seasons, and someone who just watches too much basketball. So I'm always happy to talk to you guys about it as basketball aficionados yourselves. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, on Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is comment anything below. And today's question is simple. What would be, in your opinion, the biggest success for the Utah Jazz that can happen this year? Could be individual, could be a team goal. Let me know. And I've got 3 coming up for you guys. This episode today is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Yeah, that's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Couldn't recommend that more highly. It's a blast. All right, what's coming up on the show? In the first segment, I'm going to talk about Keyonte George taking a notable leap. That would be one of the biggest wins for the Jazz. Second segment, I'll talk a little bit about Cody Williams and his confidence and what type of rookie years he could emulate. I did a little bit of research, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about guys that I think proved their worth early in their career without putting up the most eye-popping numbers. And it doesn't always take eye-popping numbers to be recognized as a franchise piece down the road. And in the final segment, I'll talk about Walker Kessler and Taylor Hendricks consistently putting together those good flashes and have fewer lulls, as how that would be the third and final win that I see as possible. That would be humongous for the Utah Jazz. So let's dive right in. Keyonte George showing signs of becoming the franchise's point guard of the future is the biggest win that's possible this season for the Jazz. You'll see more consistent shooting, which last year was there and volume was good, which means if he shot 6 threes a game, which he did, I believe that means that there's confidence from the coaching staff that they think those are good shots and that he should be taking them. Yes, his efficiency wasn't very good. I'm well aware. I did stats on it all year, wrote plenty of storylines of last 10 games, Keyonte George shot well. Last 10 games, Keyonte George shooting really poorly. His percentage from above the break is X. His percentage from below the break, not so great, or is not as great as you'd want it to be. I looked at all of this all of last year. I'm well aware. But I think that trust is the volume. The volume is the indicator of trust and the indicator of ability. And so Keyonte George had flashes, games where he hit multiple threes against good defense, step back, off the dribble, different types of shots that are more difficult than just catch and shoot threes. He has the capacity to have one of the biggest weapons in basketball, which is the ability to hit an off the dribble 3 consistently and punish defenses in a way that they're not used to being punished. Like, that's why Steph Curry and Damian Lillard are so dangerous, is because they can shoot these threes from anywhere and they can pick up the dribble and pass. They can drive past you, or they can pick up from 30 feet and drain a 3 off a screen. And if you jump out too far, they hit the roll man. Now, he's not there yet, but I think that will be part of it. You'll see this growth as a shooter, both percentage-wise, and I think the volume will either stay the same or even increase slightly. So last season, Keyonte George averaged 13 points per game, 4.4 assists, 39% from the field, which is quite low. I wish that one were higher. 33% from 3, a little above 33% from 3. Shot 5.9 threes per game, like I mentioned moments ago. But that was with varying minutes and varying roles. Sometimes he's the starting point guard. Sometimes he's off the bench. Sometimes he played next to Jordan Clarkson, who handles a lot of the scoring burden from the backcourt. Sometimes he played next to Colin Sexton, who does so in a different capacity. And sometimes he played with Chris Dunn. And, you know, you can make an argument that he was more successful with some than the others, but I think it's going to be a more ironed out system this year on who Keyonte George is going to play the most with. And I think it'll help him. It'll behoove the Jazz to let Keyonte George rock with a more stable environment. That volume, by the way, led to top 5 rookies in scoring. Unless you count, so that's contentious across the board because some players had fewer games. So Wembanyama was 1, Brandon Miller 2, Chet Holmgren, who I don't perceive as a rookie, but we'll count him, was 3. G.G. Jackson, who had far fewer games played, was 3 or 4, depending if you count Chet. And then Scoot Henderson passed up Keyonte at the end, but he also played in fewer games. So the numbers, basically, he's 5th or 6th the way you look at it. No need to get into the dramatics there. So he was 6th in scoring, and in terms of made threes, he was top 5. And I expect a breakout further than that. And that's already a good player. Like I've said, it's a great question to have to ask is, hey, does our 16th pick, who's been a 2-guard his entire life, have a chance to be our franchise point guard? It's not something to be, oh, shoot, that stinks. Here's some projections I found from Basketball Reference as I was researching his stats. They project for his second year, Keyonte George to have, let's see, what does he have? They project him to score 17.8 points per game, shooting 41% from the field, 35% from 3, 85 from the free throw line. Stark improvement. Mind you, that's 2% better from the field. That's 1.5% better from 3. That's better from the free throw line. Now let's get to his assists. 5.9 from 4.4. That's pretty good. And rebounds, he was about 2.8 last year. That they have him at 4.1. So that's market improvement in every way. They also have his attempts per game from 3 jumping from 5.9 to 7.6. And then his field goal attempts, he'd be shooting 14 field goals per game. That's great. I love that. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. In fact, before I found that stat, I was going to tell you guys, I spoke to Locked on Fantasy Basketball's host, Josh Lloyd, and I said I projected Keyonte to score 16 or 17 points, and his math supported that with around 17.5 points and 6.2 assists per game. And then I told him one of my bold predictions is that Keyonte gets to around 19 should the Jazz be truly terrible and they turn the reins over even more so to the youth. And he didn't bat an eye at that. In fact, I told him 16 points, and he was like, I have him about 17.5. That instilled confidence in me, even though I'm the Jazz guy. Like, all I watch is the Jazz, and it's all I think about. And I started to think, okay, well, if this national publication of like how he does stat projections year after year bodes well for Keyonte, that's great. Then I went to Basketball Reference. That's a ton of stats. That bodes well. Now, I'll be the first to admit, some of the scoring could be empty calorie scoring in the sense that the NBA features fast pace and a lot of threes taken, a lot of offense, and someone needs to score. No matter if you're a good team or bad team, someone needs to score. So it could be that, but I'll be looking for the control of the team, the commanding presence improving on the court, and more. I thought he improved throughout the season last year, but there were certainly turnovers that were needless. There were certainly shots that weren't executed through the entire offense that he forced up, or he would pass to the first read and not read through the play. You watch enough basketball and you realize, okay, that's going to happen and growth is going to come. I want to see some of that maturation that doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but you hear verbally on the court from watching him. You see the growth mentally, even in the approach to the game. That's the stuff I'm looking for. And then I statistically would love to see the 17-6 that Josh Lloyd projects. Basically the same as what Basketball Reference projects. To me, it would be a massive success to have a large step positively from a returning player who then inks himself into the rotation. It's not in pencil now. Inks himself in pen to the rotation for when the Jazz figure to compete. Doesn't mean he's the franchise point guard, but it means he's going to be there when the Jazz are ready to compete. He's 20. He's going to be 21 by mid-year this year. If you at 21 can say, you know what, next couple of years, I'm going to continue to get better, and you can put me into that rotation. You can maybe have me start, maybe come off the bench, maybe be the point guard, maybe be a shooting guard, but I'm going to be there, and I'm going to prove to you guys that I warrant that discussion. That's a huge, huge win. So that's my number one win that I see as possible. And it's far from a guarantee that when the Jazz are ready to compete, that Keyonte is the point guard. But I think the biggest win the Jazz could have of individual successes this year, barring an absolutely massive rookie year from Cody Williams or one of the other rookies, would be Keyonte George stepping up in a way that you could perceive in terms of his feel for the game. And then, of course, the numerical numbers would follow that. Coming up next, I'll discuss what I perceive to be the second biggest possible win for the Utah Jazz after a few words from FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin here. Happy as always to be filling in for David Locke. And I talked about Keyonte George in the first segment as how that would be the biggest win to me in how the Jazz could have a win in what figures to be a down year. You need to have things to look forward to, things to come out of a down year looking back and say, wow, that's encouraging. So the second biggest one, and you could make the arguments as the first, and I teased it at the end of the last segment, would be that I'll rephrase it. I think this could be the biggest, depending how great the season is. But within reason, I order it the way I did. The second biggest win for me the Utah Jazz could have that would invigorate the franchise and delight fans through a bad season where the Jazz don't figure to win a lot of games would be Cody Williams having a bona fide, oh, he's really good. And those moments not being sparing, but those happening frequently and making himself already indispensable. I think it's a little bit less likely as his game is understated. So boosting his ego and putting strength on will be vital. So it's not going to be Donovan Mitchell. As soon as he starts, he's going to put down a bunch of points, and you're going to say, well, we can't keep him out of the starting lineup. I don't think it's going to be quite like that. But I do think there's going to be moments where you watch him and there's this palpable, oh, we need to play him. We need to keep him moment. Like Donovan Mitchell from the summer league onward. And I love Donovan from at Louisville. He was my preferred pick when the Jazz were at 24. I wrote an article when I was about 16 years old about why the Jazz should take Donovan Mitchell before the trade happened. And then once they worked him out and it was all hush hush, I was like, oh man, probably not going to take him. But then we traded up and we got Donovan Mitchell. And then the summer league, he duels Jason Tatum and there's just this buzz. I don't think you're going to get that palpable of a buzz, but I do think you're going to get this intrigue because he's going to have moments in a game that make you say like, okay, we might have something here. I never felt that personally. Maybe some did, because I've heard many people say that Hendricks is the more promising rookie than Keyonte George last year. I never felt that way about Hendricks last year, who's a top 10 pick. I thought, okay, well, that's improvement, but I never felt, oh, geez, like that's really good. Like that's something that we need for the future. Absolute necessity. If it works out, that's great. So for reference, what I'm saying about generating that buzz is I'm not saying he needs to score 20, not even 15, but 10, and great defense does the trick and then some. For reference, Podziemski is considered to be untouchable by the Warriors as we were trying to get Podziemski in the packages surrounding market. And who knows how serious that was, but he was considered untouchable. And his stat line as a rookie after being an upperclassman in college reads as 9 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. That's really solid, and he was first-team all-rookie and deservingly so. But like that's not an eye-popping, gaudy numbers from the perspective of, okay, like that means he's an untouchable? No, like you need some context and some nuance to that. The year before, Cody Williams' older brother, Jalen Williams, scored 14 on a good team, and you knew star in the making. Like that one was great. Keegan Murray on 12 on a good team for the Kings was untouchable, and you knew it. You felt it. Jeremy Sohan, 11 points per game, and that was to be determined. And less promise there because they were so bad that they were able to get Victor Wembanyama. So that one I have a little less of okay, like I feel really good about Jeremy Sohan. And then there was the to be determined bunch of Sohan. And then you have two guys who scored 16 a game in their rookie years in Jaden Ivey and Benedict Mathurin, who Ivey scored a lot, especially when he got the reins when Cade Cunningham got hurt, which makes his numbers a little bit inflated. And Benedict Mathurin scored 16 a game and came out of the gates gunning. He was great to start. Neither of those guys I think are untouchable or all-world talents, but you certainly would accept that stat line from Cody Williams. I don't think we quite get there because those guys had the ball in their hands more and figured to be more immediately impactful offensive players. Some guys that I think are more in the ballpark of what we're going to see are Jalen Suggs, 11.8 points per game, and then Emmanuel Quickly, 11.4 points per game. I think Cody Williams has a chance to be better than both those guys, but I think in the understated fashion of the way he plays, it's not a loud game. Even at Colorado, he was fitting in along with KJ Simpson, who was ball dominant, along with an all-conference player in Tristan da Silva, who was picked 18th this year, along with Eddie Lampkin, who clogged the middle of that paint, was a good passer, but didn't allow for driving to be as open in the NBA. I think Cody, all those things bode well for him, but he does so in an understated way. I thought his 15 points per game in the summer league were understated in the way that he attacked. What he did is he scored off of attacking closeouts, hitting open threes, rather than giving the ball, letting him rock. So you're going to have to see some nuance in what he does as opposed to the loud, hey, give him the ball, we already know we have a dude. I list all these players as guys I think are in a category where you'd say they factor into the equation of the future for all their teams based on their rookie years. The difference with Jalen Williams, Cody's older brother, and Keegan Murray, and even Podziemski to some degree, is they balled out on good teams that had winning aspirations immediately, and therefore we're not saying, oh, let's bring these guys along ever so slightly and let's just boost their egos. No, they were trying to win those games. Cody then, in theory, would score more on a bad team, you might say. Well, I don't think he will, but it would be a massive win if he does. Cody offensively being super aggressive is that massive win. But if by the end of the year he's scoring double digits and starts to put up more points at the end of the year as the year is winding down, the emphasis is on the rookies thriving, and he starts accelerating his numbers, his shot attempts, his rebounds, his assists, his usage rate, if you're going to get that nerdy, if that stuff starts to rise and the efficiency stays similar or even improves, then I feel very good about double digits, and that's a massive, massive win. I remain, and then the other thing, speaking of mass, Cody Williams needs to add mass and strength to his body. I remain super high on his ability to get better at a lot of things by just gaining strength. Most of his deficiencies, I think, are correctable, I should say, by just gaining strength. It's that simple. I think he becomes a better driver. He's already demonstrated great finishing ability at the Summer League. I think he becomes an even better finisher by gaining strength. I think he becomes a better defender, a more versatile defender by gaining strength. I think he's able to play more positions offensively and defensively by gaining strength. I think he punishes smaller players playing the two when he gains strength. I think he's able to defend up and switch and be a hassle, like a guy that just is a pain in the butt, a pest to get past once he puts on weight. And that's all the stuff. I want to see the versatility with which he was employed by Tad Boyle at Colorado start to creep into what Will Hardy does with him. And then as the year progresses, you give him the ball and see what he can do, because the Jazz don't have the expectation to win. They want the growth. I think he's going to play from day one. The minutes will grow, the points will grow, and that'll be the strength. So, and that'll be aided by strength, I should say. And that'll be the strength of the Jazz this year. Is I think they're going to have a true focus on getting the young guys the ball and letting them do their thing. And it'll be a project of evaluation by Danny Ainge and Will Hardy, who are going to say, oh, I don't know what I believe in this guy. Do I believe in this? It'll be very interesting to see the way and the intentionality that the Jazz operate with throughout the season, month by month, especially towards the spring. Now, back to Jalen Williams, because everyone talks about, oh, he gets this stimulus package of his brother being excellent. Well, his brother's excellent. He and Jalen do not have the same build, nor the same twitchiness. Jalen's stronger and a little more twitchy, but actually they ran at a very similar rate, and their gait, meaning their stride, was pretty much identical as measured by P3, a sports science place. But Jalen was 21 when he was a rookie. Cody will be 19, or is 19. And while my money is on Jalen being the better player down the road, because frankly, I've said this at points last season to many people who listened, maybe not on here, but Gordy Chiesa and many other people, is I would have dealt him straight up for Lauri Markkanen. That's how confident I am that Jalen Williams is going to be a star, because I think he's better on the ball, he's young, and then the Jazz timeline would line up. It's not happening now, so I won't get too far into it, but that's how confident I am in Jalen Williams. So you don't need to be better than your brother because you are a higher rated recruit and you're 2 years younger coming into the NBA. But Cody Williams is really great already as a secondary. I think he could be the primary. He just has a guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who was second place in the MVP. But that's not to disparage what Cody Williams can do. He's a serious talent. Cody, I would expect to score 8 to 10 points, and month by month, that number will grow. And by March and April, I would love to see about 13 or 14 points a game and his shot volume from 3 in particular to rise. I kind of expect him to shoot sparingly from 3 to begin. He only shot 2 a game at Colorado, and even though he shot 42%, and I think he'll look to attack closeouts, attack off the bounce, and get to what has worked for him at every level of striding to the rim and using his really good coordination, dexterity at the rim to finish. I'm also curious to see which defensive assignments Cody Williams takes as the year progresses. Does it change? Like Taylor Hendricks started guarding the Luka Doncic's, the Kevin Durant's, the Anthony Edwards of the world. How soon does Cody Williams draw some of those similar assignments? I'd like to see him play the 2 and become a massive 2 guard who scores 13 to 14 a game and defends well the final 2 months of the season, which serve as purely developmental for the Utah Jazz, barring a massive surprise. In sum, a massive win for the Jazz would be if Cody has a season that tells the Jazz immediately he's too good to be on the bench much and figures into the now as well as the future by scoring a bit but excelling in many facets in spurts. Doesn't have to be consistent. He just has to show that he can excel at different things throughout the season, and then the Jazz will push the chips on the table and say, all right, Cody, it's your world to explore and get better because we don't need to win immediately. You just need to continue your growth, and we're going to give you a higher usage rate. I would love a year reminiscent of Podziemski, but he is 3 years younger, so meaning 9, 6, and 4. I don't think we quite get that. But quickly would be fine, and sometimes and Emmanuel quickly is what I'm saying, not quickly as into pace, would be fine. But sometimes there's undeniable flashes that indicate this guy belongs and we need him here down the road, and the growth would get prioritized. And that's what the second massive win would be for the Utah Jazz. You got to have pipe dreams, and this would be one of them, along with Keyonte George. Lastly, coming up on Locked On Jazz, we'll discuss the final youthful pieces that could together make up a massive win for the Jazz, despite a season that will likely consist of, in my opinion, 20 to 25 wins. So you got to have some things to look forward to. I'm going to give you 2 more in the final segment. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin here with you. Walker Kessler is the one that I think is confidence is the key. Walker Kessler regaining confidence and finding a way to be offensively impactful after a very low on confidence year offensively, and just in general, he was low on confidence. For improving, he belongs with the Jazz down the road, and center isn't a need in the future. For the Jazz, after the likely high pick this year, and hopefully the Jazz take a star in the upcoming draft, he hopefully consolidates that center isn't a position of need. It would just be if the Jazz were to select a center such as Kaman Malalak, it would be because they deem him the best player. It would not be a need-based acquisition or draft pick. That's what would be a huge win for the Jazz. And a pipe dream is if Walker Kessler regains that confidence and the Jazz are reassured that the center spot is in good hands. And I believe the Jazz would be elated to have Kessler prove it, and will give him every chance to this year after not operating that way last year. Last year, there was denial of, hey, are we really going to be that bad? We were 500, 26 and 26 through 52 games. Worst team in the NBA through the next 30. Like, there was not a clear identity. Kessler struggled with injuries. He struggled with confidence, played different rotations, played sparingly at times, was the starter, wasn't the starter, still blocked shots at an elite level. Like, that's his skillful trait. Can the rest of his game not catch up, but start to improve to make him a far more well-rounded player? That's the question, and that would be the pipe dream for the Jazz, to not have to worry about the center spot. It's particularly important because the Western Conference, not only right now, but in the future, contains Wembanyama, Jokic, Towns, Gobert, Chet Holmgren, Jaren Jackson, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and many, many more. I mean, Anthony Davis, of course, LeBron James on the interior. You got so many guys that are so good in the Western Conference in the front court, and that he has to protect the rim against. Not only protect the rim against, but be a force on the other side that they have to protect against. And the Jazz need an assertive Walker Kessler to not outplay those guys, but be able to, down the road in a playoff series, stymie them enough to lead the Jazz to have a relative advantage on a few nights. Gordy Chiesa said this, and I said this to you guys a couple weeks ago. A former Jazz coach, Gordy Chiesa, and a basketball savant, a guy who's going to forget more about basketball than we'll ever know, mentioned to me, if a player is inferior but can duel and win 2 nights out of 5 or 6 in a series, that can make you win the series. That's the difference. And we talked about this about Walker Kessler. He said if Kessler can do that against Chet in a series 5 years from now, that's the win you're looking for. And it starts this year with him asserting himself offensively, improving as a screener, improving as a finisher, reading the pick and roll when he catches it in the short roll, making the right passes. All that stuff comes with confidence. Speaking of confidence, the Jazz need Kessler to be the stopper and energy big he was as a rookie year, where he was exuding confidence, but continue to take strides as a passer and a finisher on offense. And then the guy who started to gain confidence at the end of last year is the second part of this equation in the final segment. That's Taylor Hendricks. The win would be defensively if he becomes what the Jazz believe he could be, particularly why he was drafted at number 9. He was drafted at number 9, not because he shot 39% from 3, though that helped. It was because he put a lid on the basket at times as a weak side help defender. And the Jazz saw a frame that resembled that of Jonathan Isaac, that resembled that of Jaden McDaniels, and wanted to replicate that sort of defender to elevate their when they were ready to compete, it would be resembling the frame of Jaden McDaniels, Jonathan Isaac, and they wanted to have a defender like that in that upper echelon on their own team, as opposed to facing those type of guys with tremendous length at every stage. Donovan Mitchell had to fight through so many guys. You saw Torrey Craig, you saw Gary Harris, you saw all these long defenders. You saw Dozier guard Mike Conley. Then you played against the Clippers in another series, and you got Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Terrence Mann. All these guys are huge and long defenders. The Jazz, they employed Royce O'Neal to be their perimeter stopper, who's a 6'4" power forward. Like they were devoid of length, and just no credit to Royce. He's a grinder. He plays great defense in terms of like fundamentals and work ethic, but you just need the natural God-given gifts on defense to become the upper echelon. Smarts only get you so far. Effort only gets you so far. These guys have effort, tenacity, and the gifts. Speaking of Jonathan Isaac and Jaden McDaniels, that's what they need from Taylor Hendricks. And now they wanted to overcorrect, meaning the Jazz, and get the supersized wings with the chance to have a stopper on their own side. I worry that Hendricks, and that's his appeal, but I worry that's theoretical and a little less real than some find it. And that's why he has to prove it. And honestly, I was pretty, I would say in the middle, but slightly lower than most Jazz fans on Taylor Hendricks when he was picked and throughout the season. So he's really got to prove it in my eyes. So if I'm coming off as critical, it's because I watched a lot of him. And I think that the appeal of Hendricks, even when he was drafted, was based on raw ability. So the belief that the potential was higher just because you'd seen less of him. He wasn't on the main pages of ESPN as a top tier recruit. He came into UCF, didn't expect to go one and done, and then he did it. And then his year with the Jazz was a little disappointing for most of it. And then he had 2 months where he burst onto the scene and shot 55% from 3 as a dare shooter. So that improved his stock by many's eyes. But before that, the ball was too flat. Danny Ainge spoke about that. Him and Keyonte George need to add some arc to their ball, and it got better. So there's definitely a growth curve, and he can get better. But I'm going to rehash an article that I found, and I spoke about a few weeks ago. Andy Larson, once again, of the Salt Lake Tribune, mentioned after a summer league game where he was particularly good, but it followed a particularly bad performance. Yes, and Andy says this. Yes, Monday's performance was just one game, but players who end up contributing to their NBA teams in significant ways rarely have these kind of games. In the end, let me restart that. Yes, Monday's performance was just one game, but players who end up contributing to their NBA teams in significant ways rarely have these kind of games. In the end, playing at the NBA level just means that you end up naturally making an impact. Hendricks was invisible on Monday. He finished with 3 points and 5 rebounds in 26 minutes on the floor, shooting 0 of 6, but adding 3 free throws. The most discouraging bit of the game was just how little of an impact he made defensively. And in a game where the Jazz really could have used his length and athleticism, he stood largely stagnant. When he's presented with a familiar situation, I think he can use his length and athleticism to make an impact. When he's asked to improvise, he looks simply lost. On the offensive end, he simply couldn't be asked to dribble or he can't be asked to dribble right now. So the following game after this was written, Hendricks played a perfect first half, scored 23 points, and looked awesome. Like maybe it was a motivation thing. But Andy brings up valid questions by stating he looks lost and lacks ball skills or confidence in the ball. Like I said, that's not the big win if he gets this. That would be icing on the cake. But how can Hendricks improve? I believe he will, but how much will his improvements lead him to be part of the Jazz's long-term future, as the two top-end traits are NBA length, meaning potential defense and potential to shoot the ball would be the other one, but that's a little lower on the totem pole. So how soon can he realize them? And that's why he has a ton to prove. Can he make himself indispensable in the same way that McDaniels has for Minnesota, with the value coming as an athletic defender, less on the ball? Hendricks hasn't guarded that many guys. I mentioned he guarded Anthony Edwards and those type of guys at the end of the season, but it was more he was doing it as a weak side defender. That was his appeal coming out of UCF. And he had moments of it where you saw chase down blocks that were spectacular. Like there's undeniable flashes of talent there, but the prototype is becoming a defender on the ball who can also put a lid on the rim as a help defender. But he needs to prove that there's the ability to get there as the lockdown defender on the ball, not just having a showtime block once in a while, for the Jazz to have faith to believe in him long-term as a key piece to build with. Yes, he's given a leash because he was a 9th pick, but sometimes that's a blessing and a curse. Sometimes you take time and it's great. Sometimes it doesn't work and you're under a spotlight and it becomes really difficult. The reason I reiterate the McDaniels part is I think the biggest win isn't Hendricks shooting 39% again, but this time as a non-dare shooter. That would be great. It means he's a really good shooter in the NBA, which would mean he's raised his percentage and raised his respect around the NBA. The reason I bring up McDaniels is because he can't shoot still. McDaniels is a liability offensively. Yet, he's indispensable for a team that was a few games away from making the NBA Finals, beat the defending NBA champions. He was is indispensable to their future plans. So the Jazz's huge win, their pipe dream, would be if Taylor Hendricks shows his defensive capacity is real. Not projection, not conjecture, and not theoretical, but it's real. He needs to show that the Jazz can put him on the best in the world, and he should be given every opportunity, whether he starts or comes off the bench. I believe he'll start. He should guard Kevin Durant every time that Kevin Durant comes to town. He should guard all these guys that you look at and you say, well, he's their top scorer. Give Hendricks that chance. The Jazz don't care if he gets burned. It would just inform them. The Jazz don't need to win. It would be great if they win those games and be surprised, but it won't happen in all likelihood. But you do get a chance to inform yourselves of what you have down the road in terms of a true stopper, or is that a misnomer? So that would be a pipe dream, is if he can establish himself as being not only a similar body type, but a similarly impactful player as Jaden McDaniels on the defensive side of the floor. So thanks for listening, guys. As always, I always appreciate it. Hopefully talk to you guys shortly. Thank you again for making Locked On Jazz your first listen. And now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search too far. Part of the Locked On NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, covering the NBA exquisitely. So thank you guys for listening. And as always, go Jazz.